Welcome to The Connecting Place with Andrea Fabry, making the connection between health and your environment. Now, here's your host, Andrea Fabry.
Today we're going to talk about finding safe products. The more you learn, the more you realize I cannot necessarily trust what I find on the store shelves, but where do I begin to find something that I can feel good about in terms of cleaning products or personal care products, and even more than that, baby personal care products. It's so overwhelming. Well, we have with us Amy Ziff, who's the founder and executive director of Made Safe. It's a new certification program, and I'm so excited for you not only to hear about Made Safe, but to hear Amy's passion and her story. Welcome to the program, Amy.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I really would love for you to share your story, because it's not just happening upon, I'm interested in safe products. This goes way back to when you were a child.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I was one of those kids in the 70s who got sick, and my mom said, I reject what the doctors are telling us about my health. At the time, it was 1979, and I was being diagnosed with something called Sydenham's chorea. And today they would diagnose that as sort of like a PANDAS-related disease, if you've heard of that. But the bottom line was they didn't know that much about the disease. They didn't really know why, but what the affectations were for me anyway was uncontrollable shaking, particularly it started in my hands. I was 9 and it was hard to hold my pencil or chopsticks, which I noticed when we were eating, which was one of the things that sort of just was striking for me. But anyway, it made it really hard to have precise motor control, but I was also having headaches and severe migraines. And so it was just getting in the way of a lot of stuff and growing worse. And so CAT scan after CAT scan, my mom was told, well, we're sorry to tell you this, but your daughter has a degenerative disease and she's going to ultimately end up on morphine, and it's going to be a really ugly end, and you need to prepare yourself for this. And my mom said, no. I reject that fate for my child. And so she trekked me around to a bunch of different doctors. And finally I landed in the office of an allergist, and the allergist did a food chart and wanted to know what I was eating and how we lived and did we have pets and that kind of stuff that you do when you're tracking your environmental surroundings and whatnot, and took a look at it and took me off of, and again, this is 1979, took me off of corn, wheat, and gluten. And you know what? In 2 weeks, all of the symptoms were gone. I was like just a normal fourth grader.
2 weeks? 2 weeks off of that.
2 weeks. So he also did a bunch of skin patch testing and found out that I was horribly allergic to both my cats and my dog, that I had off the charts dust, mite, allergies, trees, grasses, molds, and I lived in a house with mold, and all of these things that were in my everyday environment were really making me sick. And so I did learn at an early age that what's in your environment matters, and the way that the average person responds isn't always the way that you respond, and that you need to honor that. So fast forward about 30-ish years, not quite, I guess, I had my own children, and I have an older daughter and twins. And when my twins were born, they were allergic to everything in ways that my older daughter weren't. They were having, they were having reactions to diapers and wipes and lotions and creams and hypoallergenic washes. And I was a self-declared ecoista, and I shopped at Whole Foods and spent a lot of money for, quote, good products. And I could not figure out what was going on with my kids. Why would they have these angry red rashes and hives and bumps, and what was going on to make my kids sick? And so it was kind of that was the moment that changed my life, because it was then that I started to really research what was in the products that we use each and every day. And we all have reactions to things that we use, whether we know it or not. But that is to be alive, to be impacted by your environment and what you surround yourself with. And my kids were just saying, this stuff isn't good for us. And so I wanted to understand why, and then I wanted to understand how to fix it. So that was how I got started in what I like to say, remaking the way we live from top to bottom to make sure that we were avoiding as many toxins as we can.
So up until that point, from the time you were 9 until you had even your older daughter, you were aware, though. I mean, you were still ahead of the game before you had the twins and their issue, right?
Yeah, I mean, but I would say, so I was open to the unconventional. I was, my mom was forever altered by that experience and I would say was very alternative. And so I had a parent who was, completely out of sync with like the norms. But, when you're that age and when you've been that different, you really strive to be mainstream.
Normal?
Yeah, for lack of a better term, yes. So I think I spent a good 20 years just wanting to be normal, knowing that if I was under stress and I was not eating well, and for me, eating well meant avoiding the corn, gluten, and sugar, which, corn syrup was not nearly as abundant then, but has become so abundant now. But I would find if I wasn't being careful and clean on what I was eating, that I would kind of relapse into, I would get migraines. And so my body would say, hey, raising the hand here, you got to take care of yourself. And so I certainly knew all of that. And I would see an integrative physician versus maybe a traditional. But, and again, I shopped at Whole Foods, but I wasn't, a devoted 100% organic. If I saw blueberries in the store and one cost $6 a bin for the organic and the others were $3, I probably bought the $3 ones.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then when you had the twins, of course, I'm jumping ahead here, but how did you stop the rashes and the hives? Because this is leading to what became Made Safe. I know, because you try even reading ingredients and you try and find products that match. I mean, did you find the right products or how did you deal with it?
Yeah, so it was interesting. It wasn't any single item, or I guess I was doing it too fast to take the time to find any single item that made the difference. I just knocked everything out and then only brought in the purest of the pure. And I could, in order to do that, I would spend hours and hours, sometimes days. Literally, it took me 3 days to do a deep dive on sodium benzoate and whether or not I should be allowing that, because it turns out, Whole Foods allows these two preservatives, sodium benzoate and potassium sorbate, in their premium body care. And so you see them a lot. You also see them in food. So the thing about preservatives is they are preservatives, and by nature they are doing something that isn't necessarily great for the freshest of products, and so you want to think about that. And so anyway, it took me 3 days to go and decide whether or not to say thumbs up or down on sodium benzoate, and then keep going on. And I just thought, well, I mean, on that one, it's a long story, but that doesn't scale for one person, obviously, and I'm a pretty good researcher because I have a master's in journalism, and so I, can do that deep dive. But I realized there are a lot of people who want this information, not just me. And so then I was sort of floored by the fact that, wait, isn't there somebody out there who's doing this? No, there's no governmental agency or entity set up to do it. We have two really flawed, woefully inadequate pieces of legislation that should overlook both in the cosmetics arena and then in the other kinds of products that we use. They're two, without going too into the weeds on the pieces of legislation. And one dates back to 1938 and the other is 40 years old. I mean, they just didn't even exist when some of these really sophisticated kind of ingredients and chemistry was invented. So how can they be looking out for our health and well-being? And they just don't. So once I realized that, I was like, wait a minute, it kind of blew my mind. And I thought the entrepreneur in me was like, there is an opportunity here to help other people and to change this, because that seems like, why aren't people being put first? And why can't we all have access to this information? And that was really the birth of the concept of Made Safe and
well, of course,
knowing that we could do this.
So you could have gone the way of activism, though. Let's just get new legislation. I mean, there's that possibility, and there are many working on that. And you chose, what made you choose certification?
Because I thought it was more effective. And as a parent, wanting to make a difference now was what I cared about. And how do you find those products right now? Because anybody who tells you you cannot shop your way out of this problem is protecting the status quo, which is allowing chemistry and chemical companies and big giants like Dow and DuPont and Monsanto and Syngenta and Bayer and others to control the conversation, which is, we don't want legislation. Legislation is onerous and it's not good for, products and productivity and all of that. But if you want safe products, you have to demand them and you have to be able to find them. And you're not going to be able to find them through legislation, which is always watered down, always a compromise. And so being a certification, a seal on product in store, well, that becomes something that is very meaningful and tangible and you can act on. So I am all about empowering. Like, some of this stuff is pretty hardcore and it can be hard to wrap your mind around. And the first response is, for most moms I talk to, the first response is, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I've done to my child. Mm-hmm. And I very quickly try and say, you know what? I'm glad you're having this response because you're getting the severity of doing this, but every single thing you do to remove an ingredient of potential harm from your life, your child's life, your family's life, is an opportunity to help your body. Because you know what? Our bodies were so cleverly designed, evolved over, centuries and millennia to detox. And so our bodies do a really good job of detoxing. The problem is we live in such a toxic age that there's no reprieve on that. So everything you can do to take away things that are irritants, whether you're seeing the physical irritation or not, is going to be helpful to your body. And that was really the message I wanted to send, was you can do this. You can act on this. We can make a difference. And then we can construct Made Safe, our certification, in such a way that we can move the entire market. And you know what else we can do? We can change the way products are made, not just in this country, but around the world, because we have a global supply chain. And as we start to, or brands start to reject certain ingredients because their consumers don't want them, because they can't be made safe, then we really start to, have this domino effect down the line, up and down supply chain. And to me, that's exciting and awesome and hopeful and empowering. And so I'm here to say, you can do this. And you don't have to take 3 days to research something. Just buy Made Safe.
Well, that's exactly what you're doing. You're doing all of that groundwork for mothers who are frantically trying, to look up sodium benzoate. Did I even say that right?
Sodium benzoate.
Benzoate, yes.
Benzoate.
Right. I can picture it, but I didn't know how to say it.
Yeah.
To even begin to do that. And I also want to jump in on something that you said, Amy. As a mother, I was horrified when I realized what I had allowed my kids to eat, the products, the laundry, everything, let alone we had a toxic exposure in the home that I was oblivious to. It is paralyzing and can be paralyzing. And I agree with you. I would rather know than not know. And the good news is every little step forward changes things for your child. Yeah. So I so relate to that. And one other thing that you said, and I want you to allude to this, because your body, and this is another piece of interesting information on your story, your body doesn't detox this stuff well.
Right. So the thing about me is I carry a particular gene mutation, which is called MTHFR. I think of it as the mother, I won't fill in the rest of it, gene mutation. And what's so interesting about it is, first of all, 50% of the population carry it. It's not that unique to me. Depends. You can be homo or heterozygous for it. So 1 or 2 pairings of it on your DNA. But basically what happens when you have MTHFR is you do not process chemicals as well as people who don't have that gene mutation. And so for me, this becomes a big part of the explanation about why I would be sensitive, more sensitive maybe on that spectrum than others, why my kids would be, because they carry the mutation. So, and my mom has the mutation. So, it is hereditary, and there are things that we can see, and then we know how once you know you have that gene mutation, you can boost your vitamin B, which will help you methylate better, which helps you process the chemicals and toxins out of your body, and you can dial up on other things to help your body with detoxing. So that's something I'm always cognizant of. But I think some people are really the way they ask why or frame the question is like, why would this happen to me and not somebody else? Well, maybe you're chemically sensitive, and that can be dictated by your DNA. And that said, I think about DNA a lot because I think about the science in all of this that sort of underlies the way that we work at Made Safe. And now doctors talk a lot about epigenetics, and that is basically boiled down to the fact that you are not just the sum total of your DNA, but you are you have the potential to do a lot in your life, and your DNA may just be one particular map, but you can dial it up and you can dial it down. And if you think of your health as like those scales, two-sided weighted scales with those two sides, think of one of those sides is disease and the other side is wellness. Which side of the scale do you want to be loading up on, right? For me, and I think for most people, the obvious answer is wellness. So everything you can do to remove a toxin is tipping your scale towards wellness. And so for epigenetics, that would be the equivalent of like dialing down on disease and dialing up on living your most healthy and well self. And we know that is very much contributed to what you eat, how you manage your stress, and what's in your environment. And so at Made Safe, we focus on that, what's in your environment, all the stuff that's in your life.
I heard a great analysis or a teaching about epigenetics, meaning that the DNA is the words in the sentence and the epigenetics is the punctuation, that the environment really contributes to how this is communicated in your immune system, and is very hopeful. The whole area of epigenetics is so hopeful.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating. And I just, I think we don't know a lot, but we also do know more than many people kind of give credit to. And so the people at the forefront of talking about, how the environment plays on our health and well-being are doctors that I find, infinitely fascinating, and worthy. And we're some of the doctors that, Dr. Alejandro Younger, who has a whole program called Clean, was one of the first doctors that I read in his book about trying to really use clean products in your home. And I thought, somebody's talking about this, somebody mainstream. He's a best-selling, doctor. And he's a cardiologist who practiced in some of the best hospitals in New York. Like, okay, this is real, right? This isn't just alternative anymore. And you go to see any functional medicine doctor, and they're going to be addressing this, or a naturopath. And so it's exciting to me because there's so much change that can happen. And I think when you look at the status of disease, not just for children, although that is certainly concerning, but for adults as well. So many of the diseases that are raging in America today, from obesity and diabetes and cancers of all kinds, and, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, they've all got connections to things that we wouldn't allow in Made Safe, things called endocrine disruptors and obesogens that are part of the endocrine disruptor family, or flame retardants, or heavy metals, or straight out carcinogens. And so if we know this, why are we inviting them to the party? Why aren't more people absolutely flat out rejecting it? And so that was a big impetus for me was, the reason people aren't flat out rejecting these things is because there are over 85,000 ingredients that are in use today. And who can track all of those? I certainly can't, and I study this each and every day, but my database can. And so we can make it possible to parse those things and say those ingredients, they're just simply not allowed. We can do better. And for the things that we haven't figured out how to do better, let's challenge companies to think radically outside of the box and leapfrog from where we are today to where we need to be for a healthy and sustainable future.
As we conclude, and I can't believe it's already been almost 30 minutes, Amy, as we conclude, I want to direct our listeners to Made Safe, and to find out exactly which companies are made safe, just conclude for us what your vision is for the Made Safe label.
Our vision really is to be the good housekeeping seal of approval for the next century, and to do that in a way that we are known for protecting human health. And we also look at the environment and the ecosystem, but above all, Made Safe is about being made, a product being made fundamentally with safe ingredients that won't cause harm, and just having that peace of mind. So letting people shop that way now, and that one day off in the distant future, but I can't wait for it, we put ourselves out of business, because everything will be made. And at the outset, people say, well, we got to make sure we're making those from safe ingredients, and that would be the obvious instead of the way it is today.
Amy Ziff, founder and executive director of Made Safe, thank you for sharing your vision.
Thank you, Andrea.
You've been listening to The Connecting Place, making the connection between health and your environment. Join us again next time for The Connecting Place with Andrea Faber.